Imagine a land shattered into 100 warring pieces, a time when princes were kings and the idea of a unified nation was a distant dream. This was Ethiopia in the mid-19th century, during an era known as the Zemen Mesafint, the era of the princes. Out of this chaos, a man of humble birth would rise, a figure so compelling, so ambitious, and so tragic that his story still echoes through the Ethiopian highlands. This is the story of Kassa Haile Giorgis, the man who would become Emperor Tewodros II, the Lion of Magdala. Born around 1818, Kassa was not destined for the throne. He was an outsider, a guerrilla fighter who saw the fragmentation of his country and dared to dream of its reunification. For decades, Ethiopia had been a patchwork of fiefdoms, each ruled by a powerful warlord. There was an emperor, but he was a mere puppet, a symbol without power. Kassa fought his way through this fractured landscape, battle by battle, victory by victory, fueled by a fiery vision. By 1855, he had defeated the last of the great regional lords and was crowned Emperor of Ethiopia, taking the regnal name Tewodros II. This name wasn't chosen by chance. It was a powerful statement. It invoked a prophecy of a righteous ruler named Tewodros who would restore glory and peace to the empire. The expectations were immense. From the moment he took the throne, Tewodros embarked on a radical mission to forge a modern, centralized Ethiopia from the ashes of feudalism. His ambition was breathtaking. First, he targeted the very structure of power that had kept Ethiopia divided. He sought to dismantle the feudal system, where loyalty was to local chiefs, and replace it with a system where loyalty was to the emperor and the state alone. He envisioned a professional, standing army, loyal only to him, replacing the private armies of the nobles. This wasn't just about consolidating power, it was about creating a nation. To build this new army, he knew he needed modern technology. Tewodros was fascinated by European advancements. He actively recruited foreign artisans, engineers, and military advisors, bringing them to his mountain fortress of Magdala. His goal was to build a domestic arms industry, to manufacture cannons and mortars that could rival those of any foreign power. He famously said, "I know the tactics of the European governments. First, they send out missionaries, then the consuls to support the missionaries, and then the battalions to support the consuls." He was determined that Ethiopia would not suffer the same fate as other nations falling under colonial influence. He would meet Europe on its own terms. His reforms didn't stop with the military. He tried to rein in the immense power of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which owned vast tracts of land and was a state within a state. He sought to reduce the number of clergy and bring the church's wealth under state control, arguing that the resources could be better used to fund his modernization projects. He also championed development, attempting to build roads to connect his vast empire and even establishing a national library. He understood that a modern state needed not just guns, but infrastructure and knowledge. But for every step forward, Tewodros faced a tidal wave of resistance. The regional nobles, stripped of their hereditary power, rose in constant rebellion. They were not ready to surrender their autonomy to a central monarch, especially one they viewed as an upstart. The church, whose privileges were threatened, also turned against him. His dream of unity was constantly challenged by the very people he sought to unite. The country was in a perpetual state of civil war, and Tewodros had to spend most of his reign marching from one corner of his empire to another, putting down revolts. As the internal pressure mounted, Tewodros's character seemed to shift. The early visionary, known for his sense of justice, became increasingly harsh. The death of his beloved first wife, Empress Tewodros, who had been a moderating influence, was a devastating blow. His methods grew more brutal, his punishments more severe. He became isolated, surrounded by enemies and betrayed by those he had once trusted. The charismatic unifier was now seen by many as a ruthless tyrant. His dream was curdling into a nightmare of paranoia and violence. It was in this desperate state that Tewodros made his most fatal miscalculation. He had long sought an alliance with Great Britain, seeing Queen Victoria as a fellow Christian monarch who might provide the technical assistance he needed to modernize his nation. He wrote her a letter, a plea for friendship and expertise. But in the complex bureaucracy of the British Foreign Office, the letter was misplaced, ignored, and left unanswered. For Tewodros, this was not just a diplomatic oversight. It was a profound and personal insult. Feeling snubbed and disrespected by a power he had hoped to treat as an equal, his patience snapped. In a fit of rage, he imprisoned a handful of British subjects, including the British consul. He thought this act would force Britain to the negotiating table. He had tragically misjudged the situation. For the British Empire, the imprisonment of its citizens by a distant African king was an intolerable affront to its prestige. The response was swift and overwhelming. In 1867, London dispatched the British expedition to Abyssinia, a formidable force of over 13,000 soldiers equipped with the latest military technology. It was one of the most remarkable logistical feats of the 19th century. They built a port, a railway, and marched hundreds of miles into the rugged Ethiopian highlands, their target, Tewodros's impregnable fortress of Magdala. As the British army advanced, Tewodros's empire crumbled around him. The very nobles he had fought to subdue now either sided with the British or simply stood aside, eager to see him fall. He was utterly isolated. By the time the British reached Magdala in April 1868, he was a king with only a handful of loyal followers. The battle was a foregone conclusion. The modern rifles and artillery of the British force decimated Tewodros's army. Seeing that all was lost, Tewodros released his European prisoners. But he refused to surrender himself. As British soldiers stormed his fortress, Emperor Tewodros II, the man who dreamed of a modern, united Ethiopia, took a pistol, a gift from Queen Victoria, and ended his own life. He chose death over the humiliation of capture. He would not be a prize in a foreign power's triumph. Today, Emperor Tewodros II remains one of the most complex and debated figures in Ethiopian history. He is remembered as a national hero, a patriot, and a visionary who laid the groundwork for modern Ethiopia. His dream of unification and independence inspired his successors and became a cornerstone of the nation's identity. Yet, he is also remembered for his cruelty, his paranoia, and the diplomatic blunders that led to his tragic downfall. Was he a modernizing genius ahead of his time, or a tyrant brought down by his own flaws? Perhaps he was both. His story is a powerful testament to the fine line between ambition and obsession, between a unifying vision and a destructive reality. The Lion of Magdala, a figure of both triumph and tragedy, whose legacy is as dramatic and complicated as the nation he fought so hard to build. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the most compelling figures in history. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Emperor Tewodros in the comments below. See you next time.